What if you've been living the wrong life? What if everything you've worked for, everything you've built, wasn't yours? What if the career you've chased, the relationships you've kept, the person you've become, were all shaped by expectations you never chose? It's not a question most of us ask, because the answer is terrifying. It's easier to keep moving, to follow the path set in front of us, to believe that checking the boxes and meeting the standards means we're on the right track. But now and then, in the quiet moments when no one's watching, that question creeps in. What if I've spent years living the wrong life? We don't stop to wonder how we got here. We just keep going, because stopping might mean facing the fact that we've built our lives on foundations that were never ours to begin with. It's a question that doesn't fit neatly into small talk or morning routines. It shows up at night when the world is quiet, when the noise fades and the emptiness creeps in. It arrives after the job promotion that didn't make you happy, after the relationship that looks good on paper but feels hollow, after another year of routines that don't feel like living. In this video, we're not going to avoid that question. We're going to confront it. We're going to explore what happens when you wake up and realize you've been living someone else's story. And more importantly, how to finally make it your own. Because the scariest question isn't what's next. It's what if everything you've done so far was never really yours? The question we avoid. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding one simple, devastating question. Is this my life? Not the one you show the world, not the version that earns you praise or keeps everything looking stable, but the life underneath it all. We rarely stop long enough to ask if the goals we're chasing, the identity we've built, the path we're on, actually belong to us. It feels dangerous to ask, because what if the answer is no? So we keep ourselves busy. We fill our calendars, climb the career ladder, check the boxes we've been told matter, and somewhere in the process, we forget to check in with ourselves. The momentum is comforting. Expectations give us structure. Approval feels like love. And questioning any of it feels like pulling a thread that could unravel everything. But the question doesn't stay silent forever. It waits for the quiet moments, the cracks in the noise. Late at night, when you can't sleep, after a failure that shakes your identity, even after a success that feels emptier than you thought it would. That's when the question slips through. Is this the life I wanted, or is it just the life I've been performing? We're taught to follow the script. Study hard, get a stable job, find a partner, build a family, be successful. But no one tells us how to ask whether those things make us feel alive. And when that question finally surfaces, it can be terrifying, because it forces us to admit we might have spent years, maybe decades, living a story that wasn't ours. But asking isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of something honest. Because the moment you dare to wonder if you've been living the wrong life is the moment you finally have a chance to start living the right one. The blueprint you didn't choose. From the moment we're born, we're handed a blueprint. It's not something we ask for. It's stitched together by parents, teachers, culture, and society long before we're old enough to question it. That blueprint tells us what life is supposed to look like. Go to school, get good grades, find a stable career, build a family, buy a home, follow the rules. It's a map drawn by other people's expectations, and before we even realize it, we start following it like it's the only path that exists. We spend years, sometimes our entire lives, living according to that script. Not because we consciously chose it, but because we were taught that it's what good people do. We believe that success equals approval, that fitting in equals safety. And so we shape ourselves to match the blueprint, even when something inside us quietly aches. Most people spend their 20s trying to prove themselves, to show the world they can succeed. Their 30s trying to hold it all together, juggling responsibilities and appearances. And their 40s wondering why, after all this effort, something still feels missing. The path they followed was supposed to lead somewhere meaningful, but it doesn't. It leads to a life that looks good on the outside, but feels hollow inside. And the world rewards you for following the script. You get promotions, praise, applause. But no amount of validation can quiet the feeling that you're living someone else's idea of happiness. That blueprint wasn't written with you in mind. It was written to keep you safe, small, and predictable. It was never designed to help you feel free. The cruelest part is that we don't even realize we've been following it until something inside us finally cracks. Until we start asking questions we were never taught to ask. What if I never wanted this? What if I'm chasing things that don't matter to me? What if I built my entire life on a blueprint I didn't choose? That's when the blueprint starts to crumble. And that's when something real can finally begin. The weight of wasted time. The moment you realize you've been living the wrong life doesn't feel like clarity. It feels like grief. It doesn't arrive gently. It crashes over you like a wave you never saw coming. You start to look back and see all the years you spent performing, surviving, chasing approval from people who never really knew you. You remember the decisions you made because you thought you had to. The dreams you buried to play it safe. The parts of yourself you silenced so you could fit in. And underneath all of it, one question lingers like a shadow. Have I wasted my time? It's a question that cuts deeper than failure. Because failure at least feels like movement, but wasted time feels like a loss. Like you've been running in circles, pouring your energy into building a life that was never really yours. You can rebuild after failure. You can heal after heartbreak. But the years you spent living someone else's story, those are gone, and you can't get them back. It's tempting to look away, to tell yourself it wasn't so bad, to numb yourself with distractions so you don't have to face the weight of regret. But the ache doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It grows heavier the longer you pretend it isn't there. Yet regret, when you stop running from it, has something to teach you. It's not just there to punish you. It's there to wake you up, to show you how far you've drifted from yourself, to remind you that you were meant for more than the script you've been following. The fear of wasted time isn't just about the past. It's about the future. Because once you realize you've been living the wrong life, you face a choice. Keep going, pretending everything is fine, or finally choose differently. That choice is terrifying. But it's also the first real one you've made in a long time. Why we keep going anyway? If realizing you've been living the wrong life feels so heavy, why do so many of us keep going anyway? Why, even after the cracks start to show, do we double down on the script we know is making us miserable? The answer is simple, but not easy, because it's easier to stay asleep. It's easier to keep following the path you've always walked, even when it feels wrong. It's easier to stay busy, to fill your days with noise and distraction, so you don't have to sit with the discomfort. It's easier to cling to certainty, even if that certainty is slowly suffocating you. Change isn't hard because it's complicated. Change is hard because it's terrifying. It requires you to let go of the identity you've spent years building. The version of yourself that earned approval, that fit in, that knew the rules. It asks you to step into the unknown, to face the truth that everything you've been telling yourself might not be true. And the people around you won't always understand. When you start questioning the life you've built, it threatens the story they're living too. They'll tell you to be grateful, to stop overthinking, to stay the course. Because if you start asking the hard questions, they might have to ask them too. So you stay, you keep pretending. You tell yourself it's not so bad. You keep performing because the idea of blowing everything up feels too big, too risky, too lonely. But the thing about pretending is that it costs you something every single day. Every time you silence that small voice inside you, it gets louder. Every day you avoid the truth, the ache inside you grows. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes to find your way back to yourself. There is no perfect moment to change. There is no day when the fear disappears. But eventually, the weight of pretending becomes heavier than the fear of starting over. And when that day comes, you'll know. You'll be ready to choose yourself, even if it terrifies you. The moment of reckoning. There's a moment in every person's life when the facade finally cracks, when everything you've been holding together starts to fall apart, or almost does. Sometimes it's subtle. A quiet night when the silence feels unbearable. A casual conversation that cuts deeper than it should. A single sentence that makes something inside you break. Other times, it's loud and unmistakable. A relationship ending. A career collapsing. A crisis you never saw coming. Whatever shape it takes, it feels like a breaking point. But it's not. It's a reckoning. Because in that moment, for the first time, you see it. You see the weight you've been carrying. You see how much of your life has been shaped by fear, by expectation, by stories you never wrote. You see the person you've become, and you realize you don't want to be them anymore. That realization is brutal. It strips away your excuses. It leaves you exposed, raw, unable to pretend. You can't unsee it. You can't go back to sleep. But as terrifying as that moment feels, it's also the most important one of your life. Because now, finally, you have a choice. You can start asking questions you've never let yourself ask. What do I want? What matters to me, not to everyone else? What would my life look like if I stopped performing and started living? The answers won't come all at once. You might feel lost, scared, and unsure of where to begin. But the moment you choose honesty over comfort, something shifts. The script you've been following starts to fall away. And what's left is something fragile, messy, real, your life. Finally, yours to shape. You are right on time. The biggest lie we tell ourselves is that it's too late, that we've wasted too much time, made too many wrong choices, drifted too far from who we were meant to be. We convince ourselves that the life we've built, even if it feels hollow, is the only one we're allowed to live. But that's not true. The truth is, you are not too late. You are right on time. The moment you realize you've been living the wrong life isn't a dead end. It's the beginning. It's the moment everything can change. Not because you erase your past, but because you finally decide what it means. You don't have to burn your life to the ground overnight. You don't have to reinvent yourself tomorrow. You just have to start choosing differently, one honest question at a time. What do I want now? What matters to me now? What would I choose if I weren't afraid? Your past doesn't define you. It shaped you, yes. It taught you how easy it is to lose yourself, how tempting it is to perform, to survive, to chase approval. But now you know better. Now you get to choose differently. The fear of wasted time will always linger. It will whisper that you should have figured this out sooner, that you should have known better. But here's the truth. What matters is not how perfectly you've lived, but how bravely you choose to live now. You can't rewrite the years behind you, but you can decide what they mean. You can choose to see them not as losses, but as lessons. You can decide that today is the day you stop performing and start living. The wrong life doesn't have to be your whole story. It can be the preface to the life you were always meant to live. You get to write the next chapter, and maybe, just maybe, that's the only thing that's ever mattered. So if this message made something inside you stir, don't let it fade. Ask yourself the question most people avoid. Is this really my life? And if the answer scares you, good. That means you're finally ready to wake up. If you found this message helpful, make sure to subscribe and like the video. Because the next chapter of your life deserves to be written by you, and it starts right now.